Okay, welcome in, guys. This is going to be a quick one. So this is Chapter 3, Vectors, Section 2, Vector and Scalar Quantities. We've already spoken a bunch about the difference between scalar and vector quantities, so the definitions are there on the page. You can read through the textbook, to get more clarification. The one thing I did want to point out real quick was just some notation things. So I may have used this notation in class the other day, but maybe didn't go into it. We've talked about vector and scalar quantities. The only thing is I want to just say, when you see a variable, if it has this little arrow deal over it, so it's like a capital A, I mean, it can be, like an acceleration vector, lowercase a, velocity vector, lowercase v, things like that. You'll see it. You'll see with that little arrow over top of it. That just means that that unit or that variable is going to be a vector. So this would just be, acceleration, velocity. I mean, technically velocity is always a vector. But if you don't see that notation over it, maybe like speed, so maybe like an S for speed, something like that. But then you might have displacement like this with a D with the thing, and then this meaning distance. Just some examples. It's always important to just know what your units are. But if you do see that little arrow, the little arrow, half arrow to the right over top of something, that means it is a vector quantity. So that's just something to be mindful of. And then the other thing you'll see is, so like, let's say we're talking about acceleration. We know acceleration's a vector. If you see something like this, with the little, it's kind of like an absolute value around the unit, that means it's the magnitude of the acceleration. So magnitude's always going to be positive. It's basically the scalar. It's a scalar quantity. It's just how much. So it's not giving the direction. It's only giving half the picture. So it's the magnitude of the acceleration. And we'll use this for some calculations, not necessarily accelerations, but just some vectors. You may only need the magnitude. Sometimes this is just one notation. You may see this like this. You may just see, this would be your vector quantity, and then your magnitude would just be without the vector arrow on top. So it could go either way. I believe this textbook is mostly using the lines notation to deal with magnitude. So that's just something to keep in mind moving forward. Whenever we see those arrows on top of variables or on top of quantities, that means it's a vector. So that's really it. Like I said, everything else I think we've talked about. If you have any questions, just let me know. But just more of a notation thing than really anything new.